محافظا مطلقا على النظام الجمهوري الديمقراطي الشعبي.
To safeguard the interests of the people and to ensure the security of the homeland.
It is the image of a lifeless child in the arms of a rescuer on a Turkish beach.
We have regained all of Damascus. Damascus has returned. Do you understand the weight of this?
From Damascus, the home of pride and faith. The Arab Muslims ruled half the globe. Syria has been present on the map of the world since the dawn of history, with Damascus at its heart, the oldest continuously inhabited capital in the world. Many nations and civilizations ruled over it, starting with the Arameans and Sumerians, through the Seleucids, Assyrians, Romans, and others, culminating in its golden era under Islamic rule during the Umayyad dynasty. During that period, Islamic influence expanded greatly. It stretched eastward to include Iran, India, Central Asia, and parts of China, and westward to North Africa, Andalusia, Spain, Portugal, and southern France. As time and events unfolded, the Umayyad state fell, giving way to the Abbasid, Ayyubid, Mamluk, and other dynasties, ultimately leading to the Ottoman rule. This continued until 1918, when the Ottoman Empire was defeated in World War I. Its lands fragmented, and the victors divided the spoils. Syria and Lebanon were claimed by the French, marking the beginning of the French occupation of Syria and Lebanon. France occupied Syria after the Ottoman defeat in World War I in 1920.
And will substitute Syrian autonomy for the French mandate.
The French colonial administration implemented a policy of empowering minorities to weaken the majority. They promoted sectarianism and built an army based on sectarian foundations. France left Syria in 1946 after 26 years of the Syrian people's struggle against the occupiers.
This is a picture of defeated and deluded men. They are soldiers of the one.
However, this sectarian-based army created to empower minorities became the foundation of the Syrian military after independence. The 1963 coup that brought the Ba'ath Party to power marked the beginning of a new phase of political chaos.
Syria started a process that would stir up Middle East tensions.
Culminating in the 1967 defeat and the loss of the Golan Heights, this was under the then Minister of Defense Hafez al-Assad, who effectively surrendered the Golan and announced its fall before it had actually fallen, ordering his forces to withdraw from it. He was rewarded in 1970 by seizing power in Syria through a military coup.
The Assad regime emerged in 1970 when Hafez staged a bloodless coup.
He adopted a sectarian approach in governing the state, favoring his Alawite sect and appointing its members to the highest positions in the military and government.
Hafez used the party to control society.
He exploited the Ba'ath Party and its organizational structure to entrench his rule and ruthlessly suppressed all his opponents and critics. In 1971, he established the Defense Brigades as special military force to protect his regime, under the command of his brother, the Butcher, Rifat al-Assad. This force later became the 4th Division in 1984, led by his son, Maher. In 1980, the Butcher Rifat carried out a massacre in Tadmur prison, claiming the lives of more than 1,000 Islamist detainees. In 1982, as the conflict with Islamists intensified, the Butcher besieged the city of Hama, a stronghold of protests. He bombarded it with artillery and airstrikes, then invaded it on the ground with tanks, committing a massacre unprecedented in history. His brutal forces ravaged the city, killing, destroying, torturing, and committing atrocities for an entire month. They left behind a devastated city, over 20,000 dead, and a deep scar in the hearts of the people of Hama and Syrians, one that time cannot heal.
1982, the town of Hama was leveled and at least 10,000 people were killed.
It was a scorched earth campaign. They sought to annihilate anything that stood in their way.
In 1984, the butcher Rifat al-Assad attempted a coup against his brother, who had begun to suffer from the symptoms of leukemia ravaging his body. The coup failed and Rifat was exiled from Syria, roaming European countries with hundreds of millions of dollars that he smuggled out with him.
Townhouses, a castle, vast office space in Lyon, the list of Rifat al-Assad's French assets was long.
June 11th, 2000. Crowds filled the city streets. President Hafez al-Assad has just died.
Hafez al-Assad passed away in 2000 after a long struggle with leukemia. His son, Bashar, took over after the constitution was hastily amended in one parliamentary session to lower the minimum age requirement, allowing Bashar, who was younger than stipulated, to assume power.
And to safeguard the people's interests.
Bashar took power and began a new chapter of the Assad family's rule, continuing his father's methods of monopolizing power, suppressing opponents, and expanding the plundering of the country's wealth, while granting privileges and benefits to his sect and loyalists.
Children of Daraa wrote slogans on their school walls, calling for the downfall of the regime, such as, "Your turn has come, doctor, and we want to overthrow the regime."
In 2011, the winds of change blew as crowds rose demanding freedom and reform. The protests began in Daraa, but the regime, true to its nature, responded with repression and violence.
Why they get people in Daraa? Why?
For several months, the regime faced peaceful demonstrations with gunfire, killing dozens daily. This escalation led to peaceful protesters to take up arms, turning the confrontation into an armed revolution against the regime and its symbols. The revolution quickly spread across Syrian cities and towns.
A bloody day. At least 75 people were killed during pro-democracy demonstrations against the government of Bashar al-Assad.
Thousands of the regime's army joined the ranks of this revolution to form what became known as the Free Syrian Army. Within 2 years of the revolution's outbreak, the opposition controlled most of the Syrian cities and rural areas. In response to the rebels' advances, the Syrian regime carried out a horrific massacre by bombing the Ghouta area in Rif Dimashq with chemical weapons. This attack killed over 1,000 people, including children and women, in a scene that shook the world's conscience. Facing the brutal force of the regime's military and security apparatus, many people fled the country, turning half the Syrian population into refugees and displaced persons across the globe. Iran and its militias, particularly Hezbollah, intervened in the conflict. New factions also emerged on the Syrian stage, including ISIS, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and other Islamic groups. With the entry of these forces, the situation became increasingly complex, turning Syria into a battleground for global intelligence agencies. The regime's power waned significantly.
CIA is involved in the Syrian civil war.
However, Russia's military intervention in September 2015 became a decisive factor in the favor of the regime, which was on the verge of collapse. Russia launched relentless airstrikes on the opposition-controlled cities, destroying schools, hospitals, and vital infrastructure. The regime gained momentum, launching counteroffensives on the ground and in the air, in coordination with Russian bombardments and support from Iranian militias, especially Hezbollah.
These days, though, they are fighting and dying in Syria, waging somebody else's war.
The Russians and the regime devastated infrastructure, obliterating homes, crops, and lives. By dropping thousands of tons of explosives on cities and towns. This forced opposition forces to negotiate settlements with the Russians, relocating to Idlib in northwest Syria, where most of the revolutionary forces eventually gathered.
This battle is not just to break the siege, but to fully liberate Aleppo.
The Battle of Aleppo at the end of 2016 represented the penultimate chapter in the epic of the Syrian revolution. The intensity of confrontation subsided and negotiations gained traction to find a solution to the conflict. At the time, it seemed everything had frozen in place, and the world almost forgot about Syria and its tragedy. Time passed and Russia became preoccupied with its war in Ukraine, while Iran was consumed with its internal and regional issues. Iranian militias suffered devastating blows in Syria and Lebanon. Paving the way for the opportunity the revolutionaries had been waiting for. This is Homs, the capital of the revolution. A city in ruins, it was the final city the revolutionaries passed through before reaching Damascus and liberating it on November 27, 2024. The revolutionaries, according to pre-established plans, launched multiple surprise offensives, beginning in Aleppo and its countryside, which fell almost immediately after battles there. They managed to seize full control of Aleppo and Idlib within 2 or 3 days.
The battle began with cutting off supply routes and liberating villages surrounding Aleppo to reach the city itself, which was the primary target.
This vehicle is called Al-Karrar. It was heavily relied upon in this battle. It was locally manufactured, a Toyota pickup truck. It has been reinforced to become well-armored. The fighters would sit inside it during the battles because this truck is agile and capable of maneuvering effectively. The element of surprise was crucial in defeating the regime.
The battle had several fronts, but fighters on each front were unaware of the others. There were complete secrecy about the other fronts. As military personnel, each of us was specialized in our own front and knew nothing about the rest. We had specific goals to achieve.
So you started the battle in secrecy?
Yes.
The revolutionaries moved toward Hama on 2 fronts, using multiple routes to avoid airstrikes. On their way, towns began falling one after the other into their hands.
They quickly advanced from Sarakib towards the countryside of Ma'arat al-Na'man and Khan Sheikhoun. After completing their mission in Aleppo and securing full control, reinforcements were sent to find fighters already at the gates of Hama.
The fighters reached Hama, and after fierce battles around its outskirts, particularly at Mount Zain al-Abidin, the revolutionaries managed to take control of the city.
There were intense battles at Mount Zain al-Abidin. The regime attempted to hold onto it with all its might, concentrating its forces there, but by God's grace they couldn't withstand.
The fall of this mountain signified the actual collapse of the regime, so fierce battles took place at the mountain. The revolutionaries outflanked them and continued advancing toward Damascus.
What greatly helped us was the people's embrace of the revolution, which created a significant vulnerability for the regime. Our fighters entered from the city of Salamiya toward a mountain called Kafra. A large number of fighters headed to Mount Kafra and positioned themselves behind Hama. The regime's lines quickly collapsed, and we crossed through Hama.
This opened the road to Homs and Damascus. The revolutionaries continued their advance toward Homs, which represents the crossroads of Syria.
Homs is a crucial junction connecting the coastal region with Damascus. When we reached the outskirts of Homs, the regime's supply lines became vulnerable, and Bashar al-Assad's exit from Syria became unsafe. Meanwhile, fighters in Daraa formed the Southern Operations Room.
After skirmishes here and there with the remnants of the regime's weakened forces, Homs was captured, opening the road to Damascus. Signs of victory appeared, and groups of revolutionaries moved toward the coast, while others advanced toward Damascus, led by Ahmed al-Shara. On December 8, 2024, they entered Damascus. Al-Assad fled in panic, and the regime collapsed. The revolutionaries entered the city without spilling a drop of blood.
We reached Damascus in disbelief. I walked through its streets, unable to comprehend what was happening.
How long has it been since you last visited Damascus?
13 years.
You hadn't been in Damascus in 13 years?
Yes, 13 years. The people of Damascus welcomed us as victors. They began cheering, chanting, joyful celebrating, thanking God, and tearing down pictures of the tyrant president. Everyone was liberated. Everyone was happy and joyful by the grace of God.
The cowardly head of the regime fled like a frightened rat, spending his last days arranging his escape, taking whatever wealth he could carry, and leaving behind the Syria he once claimed as his personal property. He abandoned everything and left his men and regime pillars to their fate as they scrambled to follow him. Look, they all left their belongings. They left their belongings and fled. Thus, the curtain closed on the final chapter of the Syrian saga, and the people finally breathed a sigh of relief after a nightmare that lasted over 60 years.
It's as if they were in prison and visitation was forbidden.
The scene revealed the magnitude of the catastrophe, the tragedy, and the heavy legacy left by this criminal gang. Now begins the journey of rebuilding and healing wounds, paving the way for a new start in a new Syria, a free Syria, a Syria of dignity, civilization, and history, where time and the trees sing the anthem, "Raise your head high, you are Syrian."
A big salute to Homs.
From the heart of Homs.
From the heart of Homs.
Joe HaTTab.
Halau to Jibin belongs to Hama, as do the Norias, Al Asi Square, and the Orontes River.
Everyone was liberated. We've returned to Homs. We've returned victorious. We've returned as conquerors.
Syrians around the world feel pride today. The wars of the oppressed have not succeeded in the last 100 years.